and get our hearing started. And I'm going to start with just checking with our technician. So do we have Superintendent Yeager? Is he online yet? Okay. So when we get to him, when we get through this little introduction, we can just go ahead and perhaps start with him. So committee, we are here today to have our hearing, a traditional hearing on Senate Bill 532, establishing the blueprint for literacy to create a literacy advisory committee, appoint a director of literacy education. And then there are some requirements as far as what the State Board of Regents and the State Board of Education will do as far as collaborating on a literacy micro-credential and professional development. I'm not going to read all of the rest of that, but I guess the question is, are you wanting another overview from the reviser, or did any of the committee members have questions for the reviser on a particular section of the bill? I'm not seeing, and so Tamara, unless you want to get up there and go through it again, I think we'll just get started. Do you want to? Yeah. Oh, it's almost like April Fool's Day, isn't it? So we do have multiple people that want to provide proponent oral testimony, and so we will go ahead and get started with that. And we are going to get started because I know he has another meeting to attend, but on WebEx we have Dr. Brent Yeager. He is superintendent of my alma mater, the Olathe Public School District, USD 233. So I'm just going to start off with a whoop whoop go Eagles. So.
Go Eagles, that's right. And they are still playing basketball, so it's a very well-timed whoop whoop go Eagles today. So
there we go.
Yeah.
So go ahead with your testimony. We do have it in writing, but share with us why you support it, areas of concern, areas that you want us to take a double check with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thank you, Senator Baumgardner and committee members, for having me today. I certainly appreciate it. And, I want to say that conversation about literacy is so important to obviously students across Kansas, but, one of our focuses in the Olathe Public Schools continues to be, a strong literacy foundation for our students as they go through. Our strategic plan supported by our Board of Education really emphasizes for us the importance of all students reading on grade level by the time that they exit third grade. We all know that there's abundant research about that, and I'm proud of our district for the work that we've done that way. The other piece of it, though, is we know that we have kids in our system who potentially have gotten past third grade, but they still need intervention and support. And, I'm really proud of the work that our system has done in terms of supporting students throughout their educational career. We have a robust system of MTSS in our district where we have universal screeners and diagnostic tools available to catch kids even in high school who may need intervention and support based on the literacy skills that they, maybe didn't learn when they were young, and pieces related to that. So that's really an important piece for us. But, as a school district, we've worked really hard since much of the emerging research on the science of reading. But really in 2020, when the State Department said to us, all of our teachers need, or groups of teachers need, an understanding on the science of reading and best practice, if you will, in the area of literacy. Our district, we took it one step further. We trained every single one of our certified licensed staff members. And, we really recognized that it was not just our early educators in terms of those working with K1 and 2, but we have kids across our system at all levels that we want our staff to be ready to support when they notice that there's a challenge, and then know what to do with that. We're extremely grateful for the work that's been done with KSDE and around letters training. As a school system, we have over 300 certified staff members who have been trained in letters, either through the Link Literacy Grant that we were part of initially, and then also the work of KSDE in terms of the ESSER fund support in the last few years. We have 20 people who are currently going or have gone through the process to become trained letters facilitators within our system, and we think that that's really important. But as you talk about, some of our concerns and some of the challenges, one of the things that's important to us is that school systems like Olathe, where we're looking at supporting over 2,500 certified licensed educators, that we do have some flexibility in terms of determining what that looks like in terms of just the process and sequence. And the best way I could describe that is, we really do believe letters training has been great experience for our staff, but the reality is the mechanism that it would take to get that training for all of our staff is excessively challenging. With sub costs and other areas related, we estimate that for someone to go through letters training in our system is about $3,000, and that doesn't include any of the fees associated with the manuals and the training, which KSDE is obviously supporting right now through the pieces with the ESSER funds. But I will tell you from a fundamental level, the idea that higher education would be focused on this and focusing on, having kids or students that graduate from their programs being experts, if you will, in the area of literacy and what it takes to help students learn to read and become proficient readers is frankly pretty exciting to me. One of the challenges that we continue to have as a school system that doesn't have high turnover, but just the number of it in our district is, we typically hire about 200 new teachers every year, pre-K through 12. And one of the things that we're doing each year when that happens is we're filling in oftentimes gaps in terms of what it is related to reading instruction that works best for our kids based on current best practices. And, for us to have some predictable outcomes, if you will, in terms of graduates who are leaving higher education institutions to come and teach for us, that's exciting to know that that would be part of their coursework and part of the information that they came to us with. And I mentioned this again, but the centers of excellence and the areas related to that, certainly we absolutely appreciate having the resources available. But for a system like ours, we have a lot of expertise and a lot of people who really know what they're doing with this in our district, and so we'd want to be sure that we have the flexibility to work with the centers of excellence and what have you to both meet the expectations that have been established, but also have flexibility in a system like Olathe where we're going to try to meet the needs of all of our staff from a large continuum of service areas to meet the needs of our students. The other thing I would say is, as a leader is selected for this work, in terms of the Center of Excellence, and I think it says an executive director in the bill. One of the things that would be important to us is also that that person has some K-12 experience. Oftentimes there are people who are theoretical thinkers, and we appreciate that. They drive a lot of the work that we do in education, but a lot of times the difference between theory and implementation is a little bit different. So having somebody that has expertise in both of those areas would be helpful. So again, I'm excited to be with you all today. Thanks for letting me come in virtually. But I'm excited about what's offered here and just the focus on literacy for our students in Olathe, but also the kids of Kansas.
Thank you very much. So committee, what questions do you have for Dr. Yeager? Senator Petty?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Yeager, for being with us. I know that you mentioned in your testimony the fact that the costs that you're incurring currently to provide the literacy training or to have your staff going through literacy training, and that the support that you have right now are looking to continue to have for those teachers in the future. In this, you mentioned in this bill about having higher ed programs where students are coming out with that training, what do you see then as being a continual cost that the district would be facing, even with future educators being trained?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know that there would be a whole lot of continued cost outside of what we do in relation to our district professional development. We have a district professional development plan that we work through each year, and really a lot of that is refining and helping our staff understand best practice. But the difference with some of this is if new teachers come to us and don't have a lot of knowledge, then we're not only trying to get them up to speed with the expectations in Olathe and what we do in our classrooms around the art and science of teaching, the resources we use, but if we're also trying to build a background knowledge with something like structured literacy, the science of reading, that takes additional time outside of what we would be doing to support our whole staff. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just, do you feel that you would also need the support teachers that you currently, the support staff that you currently have for teachers as they are coming into your district, even if they were coming with training?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And part of that is support related to our data systems, our assessments that we use in the district. And the beautiful thing with the support teachers that we have, and in many ways it's our MTSS specialist or our instructional coaches in our district, is they're working alongside our teacher teams to make good decisions for kids when they look at the data that comes back and those pieces. But they're not there teaching, if you will, kind of the fundamentals of literacy like letters or something like that would, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yeager. I'm not seeing any other questions. We appreciate you participating in the hearing today. And if you think of anything more that you want to share with us, please be sure and get that to our assistant, and we will share that with the committee.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call on Dr. Cynthia Lane. She's a member of the Kansas Board of Regents to come and testify.
I think it's on now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee for an opportunity to be before you again this week to talk about Senate Bill 532. Today, I hope to do 5 things with my testimony. First, to frame the opportunity that is before us, to provide some background of what led to the blueprint, to outline the 6 approaches that are in the blueprint and now embedded within Senate Bill 532, and to highlight 3 of those in a little more detail based on questions that came from our session on Monday. The next thing I'd like to do is offer 3 amendments for your consideration, and of course, finally, to answer your questions. So, if I may, let's talk about the opportunity that is lying before us today. We believe, the Regents, that Senate Bill 532 will prove to be one of the most important pieces of legislation this body will consider in 2024. Our students' ability to read is fundamental to their life success, their careers, and their academic experiences, and most importantly, beyond life in school. The science is now clear, as Dr. Yeager just mentioned, on what matters in the teaching of reading. Our teaching methods have not always met every child's need, and we must change course, not only in how we teach in the elementary level, but frankly, why I stand before you as a member of the Regents, and how we prepare our teachers. So the legislation before you will create the Kansas Blueprint for Literacy. And so while my written testimony and oral today will outline some important functions and new activities that this bill would put forward, the most important thing that I'd like for you to take away from this conversation is that the blueprint is not a new government program. It is a clearly marked path with practical steps to which we can commit post-secondary education to ensure that our pre-service teachers have the tools they need to be successful in the classroom, as well as supporting teachers who are currently in service. So why now? Some of the background. You may be aware that the Institute of Policy and Social Research at the University of Kansas recently provided a report to the Regents on the economic growth of jobs in our state. Their analysis found that by the year 2030, Kansas will add 54,000 new jobs, 80% of which will require a bachelor's degree or higher. The reality is that we have more jobs which require higher skilled workers, while performance on our national assessments is struggling. On page 2 of my written assessment, we provided you with a graph that displays the percent of Kansas students who are reading at grade level on the Kansas assessment from the years 2018 to 2023. 81% of our fourth graders, as we heard on Monday, are performing at grade level or above. That is outstanding. However, performance in the other grades is somewhere between 63% and 68% of our students performing at or above grade level. But we are not alone with that challenge here in Kansas. There are states across the nation, including Mississippi, New Mexico, New York, and frankly, many, many others that are recognizing that literacy is the #1 workforce and economic development imperative. So the question is, how do we respond? The Regent's response focuses on the 3 pillars of our Building a Future strategic plan: helping families, supporting businesses, and advancing economic prosperity for all Kansans. 2 years ago, the board identified that strengthening the educator workforce was an imperative to our success. An educator workforce task force was formed, led by our deans of our colleges of education, and that task force within 3 months produced 18 very rigorous recommendations for our consideration. The board elevated 2 of those for immediate action. First was a universal elementary education licensure degree transfer program across the entire post-secondary system, so you could enter into an education program anywhere in our state, and if you needed to change institutions, you'd still be on track and on time for that degree. The second was to develop a comprehensive literacy plan. So those 2 actions alone have resulted in that standing up of that elementary education licensure program that's now in effect, and a comprehensive literacy plan based on the science of reading and structured literacy that's in the final stages of development and is moving forward towards full implementation during the next academic year. So I'm here today to say those actions are strong and important, but recognizing the power of what we could accomplish with strong alignment between the regents, between the state board, between this body and other legislators, between the executive branch, between our school districts, our teachers, families across the state, we unanimously voted to approve the Kansas Blueprint of Literacy at our last meeting in February. There are 6 approaches I'd like to quickly highlight for you, and then I'll dig into 3 in more specifics. In the bill, the approaches talk about, first, establishing that literacy advisory committee and appointing the director of literacy to work from KBOR to oversee the post-secondary plan. The second is to require post-secondary literacy education to be based on the science of reading. Third, requires our universities to develop a performance-based course and skills-based assessment resulting in a science of reading micro-credential. Fourth, requires the education pre-service teachers to include the use of a comprehensive literacy assessment system to guide instruction. Fifth is standing up those centers of excellence in reading. And 6, aligns all of us working together towards success. So let me highlight 3 of those for you, and then I'll share with you a couple of amendments we'd like to suggest. One of the approaches is the science of reading training and the micro-credential. So based on questions from Monday, I thought we need to probably talk first about a common definition for what is a micro-credential. So I want you to think about that as short, focused programming resulting in a credential that is based on in-demand skills and serves as a proxy so that individual can demonstrate they have the skill and the experience. The micro-credentials that we're talking about will be developed specifically in the area of the science of reading. Micro-credentials are often stackable, so individuals who earn those can then also use those as a path for further education and degrees. In this bill, we are charged to collaborate with the State Board of Education. I have to tell you that we didn't need that charge. We believe in that strong partnership, but together to approve micro-credentials and certification requirements for teachers in the area of the science of reading structured literacy. We envision multiple pathways to allow teachers to earn that credential. In our pre-service program, teachers will be required to take those performance-based courses and an assessment to earn that micro-credential. For in-service teachers, there may be a big variety of different pathways, such as letters that we heard about, such as the ETS Praxis reading exam, or completion of those courses at the universities. The State Board and the Regents, working with the advisory committee, could determine other ways for in-service teachers to earn that credential. Second part of that same approach spoke to education and training. So in the bill, you'll see that we are charged to develop and make accessible professional development programs for all in-service teachers, to collect data so we can ascertain how many teachers have been trained, what's the status of their earning of that credential, to ensure that our pre-service programs are based on the science of reading, to publish our standards at the post-secondary level, so it's very transparent what we're teaching, when those courses are taught, and those will be reviewed on an annual basis. And then finally, to ensure those explicit performance assessments and courses so that a teacher going through those programs can actually demonstrate that they can take all of the knowledge and utilize it. Second approach I wanted to mention is the teacher assessment tools. In your bill, you'll find that in section 4 on page 5 of the actual bill. The bill charges us to establish a comprehensive reading assessment system to be used as part of the literacy education training in universities in pre-service programs. These are those screening measures that I mentioned on Monday. Screening measures, diagnostic tools, formative and summative tools that are used by the teacher to create plans for students, to evaluate those plans, and to know exactly what to do for each and every student. So we will be offering an amendment in that current section for you here momentarily. The last big approach I wanted to talk about before your questions are those centers of excellence in reading. That shows up in the bill on section 7, page 7. What is really important to know right up front is that the advisory committee will be charged to identifying the location of those centers. We're not talking about new buildings. We're talking about locating in facilities in the community in a regionally distributed way so that families don't have to drive clear across the state to get to our one and only center of reading that's currently at Pittsburgh State University. So those centers will do 5 key things. They'll work directly with students through evaluation, diagnosis, and develop instructional plans. They'll work directly with teachers who have those instructional plans for that student or in professional development to help build that teacher's skill and capacity. The centers will work directly with building administrators and school boards so they can understand how they best support the science of reading, training, and resource allocation. The centers will also do research in the area of literacy education, and finally manage and create simulation labs which would allow an environment for teachers to come and practice in a safe environment guided by a master teacher, much like we do for nurses where they're getting that feedback on the use of the science of reading. So 5 very important things, regionally distributed across the state, working in concert with the Center of Reading at Pittsburgh State and perhaps other experts like the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center out of Wichita. So as I close, I know I shared a lot. As I close my remarks, we want to suggest some amendments, and you can refer to the written testimony on pages 5 and 6. The first amendment that we'd like to suggest is that we add a provision in the bill that makes it clear that the blueprint on literacy is subject to legislative appropriations. While the regents are doing much of this work now, in order to fully realize the power of this blueprint, more resources will be needed. The second amendment we'd like to offer is on page 3, line 31 through 35, speaking about our goal. We'd like to strike 4th and replace that with 3rd through 8th grade. So we'll be looking at 85% or whatever percentage this body might recommend of 3rd through 8th graders being at level 2, grade level by the year 20 533. And then finally, the last amendment we'd like to offer is in the bill, Section 4, page 5. It talks about actions taken by our universities. We'd like to suggest the line 26 be amended to strike by each school district and replaced with in teacher preparation programs. Our intention there is to make sure that we're training on those diagnostic formative assessments in teacher ed programs, not for the regents to be telling school districts which tools to use. So I know I went fast, Madam Chair, wanted to cover a lot of ground, but I'd be glad to stand for questions now or anytime you deem appropriate.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lane. I think what we'll do is let's get through our other proponent testimony so that then the committee can have those questions. So next up, we have Dr. Debbie Mercer, Interim Provost, Dean of the College of Education, Kansas State University. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Mercer.
My pleasure, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about Senate Bill 532 in proponent
I'm going
testimony.
to interrupt for just a second because we have 7 folks that are going to speak and we still are going to have questions. We're going to limit everyone to 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll talk really fast.
Okay.
So I want to set the stage with some collaborative work that's already taken place. I'm not going to go into the details on that work because I know Dr. Flanders has shared the summer modules that were created collectively by the Regents institutions and implemented last summer. We've taken that curriculum and those videos that were developed by 19 Regent experts across the system, including Washburn, and incorporated those into our pre-service elementary education programs. So we did curriculum maps individually at each institution on our reading curriculum in our elementary ed program again. We identified gaps, and then we helped each other fill in any of those gaps. That work is being piloted this spring semester. In addition to that content knowledge that is being presented in those courses, we took a look at our reading practicums. We developed a common instrument, a work sample, where students would need to be working with individual students implementing the concepts of structured literacy and assessing those. And then we created a common assessment that we're using across the system. So again, that work is being piloted. That assessment has not had validity studies or reliability studies. Those are underway, and we know that those are goals for the future. I might add that our 2 new courses, the Science of Literacy, Science of Reading 1 and Science of Reading 2, are aligned with the new Kansas State Department of Education elementary standards and the International Dyslexia Standards and the International Literacy Association standards to be sure that what we were doing was in alignment with national guidelines. So this common work sample and rubric assessment, again, is underway and fulfills part of our responsibility for the translational research that is necessary. So we have this science of reading body of knowledge. We need more research around what specific strategies are really working well, and that's a responsibility of higher education and our research institutions in particular. So Senate Bill 532 builds on this collective work. It sets goals for the future as we look at early childhood programming, special education programming, and implementing the micro-credential. As I close on a personal note, I want to really advocate for the reading centers. So as a grandmother of a student who has been diagnosed as dyslexic, we had to travel 2 hours to Wichita to have that testing done. We need to recognize that not every child in Kansas has access to travel 2 hours or the financial resources to have that testing. So those reading centers are absolutely a critical piece of this bill that will impact statewide. So again, I look forward to continuing to work collaboratively to build on the momentum that the Regents institutions in Washburn have made thus far as we all work together on that goal of literate children in our schools so that we have literate citizens for our future.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Mike O'Neill, Kansas Policy Institute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee has my testimony, so I'll try to be brief and stick within the 2-minute requirement here. We stand in support of the blueprint for literacy, and particularly want to compliment the work that went into putting this all together, and we particularly like the collaborative effort that goes into this, because we have the need for legislative involvement, we have the need for State Board of Education involvement and Board of Regents, and to have all those come together in support of this is tremendous. Our focus and what we want not to be lost in this work, which will start now and will continue, is I want you to imagine just this constant drumbeat in the background and be thinking about that. And that drumbeat represents the heartbeat of kids that are in school right now. And as this session finishes, those kids will either graduate or they'll go from grade 3 to grade 4 or what have you. And that beat goes on, and it goes on every single day. So we don't have a moment to waste. What is a little unclear, although I think it's implied, is that the work that is going on right now continues. These teachers are being trained. The State Board of Education recently made a statement that any of these teaching methods that don't work, stop them now. Don't buy any more curriculum that is not going to be effective. And so we applaud that as well. We do have some concerns that are addressed in the testimony. The debate goes on about level 2, and we will perpetuate that debate, and we've showed the reasons why we think that is not an appropriate standard. Technically, you could meet the goals in this bill by having 100% of those kids at level 2. That's not acceptable. We suggest that it ought to be level 3 or 4. The 85%, as long as it stays there, is probably fine, but there's abundant research that says 95% is the amount of kids. There's maybe 5% that are not going to be able to reach that. So let's not lose sight of the research that 95% is the overall goal. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Jim Carlskint with USA. Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee, for allowing me to be here today. I'll be brief. We don't have much time, and there's been a lot of information shared at this point. I'm pleased to say we are here to support this legislation. The comments that were made earlier, especially by Dr. Lane and others, with respect to the positive things about it, we agree with. We also agree with the amendments that she suggested. One thing that I really like about this bill is that we continue to train our adults that are working with teachers continually. You just can't put somebody in the classroom and leave them alone and hope that things go well. This prevents that. And I won't go into any other long dissertations, but I want to comment about the levels. And I hate to disagree with Mike O'Neill because we both agree on this bill, and that's unusual. But level 2, when you look at the upper half of level 2, we're talking about a 21 ACT. So, there's a wide range in level 2. And I guess I also caution you to put the levels in statute. That's concerning because the test is going to change, and we want our kids to grow, and they will grow. We're here to help kids improve. And so with that, Madam Chair, I'll close and let others take, if I've got a few seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Timothy Graham, Director of Government Relations and Legislative Affairs for the Kansas National Education Association. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tim Graham, KNEA. I will be as quick as I can here. You will see by reading our testimony, our resolution that is very supportive of the science of reading. And these are resolutions that are adopted by our representative assembly, our educators, our members. And so we take literacy very, very seriously. There are some key components of this bill that we can be very supportive of. One of those things is the inclusion of Kansas NEA at the table. with an appointment to the Literacy Advisory Council Committee. That will ensure that we have a voice at the table as this process moves forward. And as you've heard me say many, many times, we think that's critically important, and we thank you for including us. The goal of 85% of fourth graders scoring a level 2 or higher on the Kansas ELA state assessments by 2033 is also one that we believe is realistic. Kansas teachers, like so many other professionals in the workforce, are saddled with a tremendous amount of student loan debt. That's why oftentimes we're very skeptical of continuing education mandates that would come at the expense of the educator. That is why we appreciate the legislative intent of Senate Bill 532 that no educator should be required to cover the cost beyond their pre-service education out of their own pocket. We're also very appreciative at the fact that House Bill 532, Senate Bill 532 recognizes that educator time is valuable and that in-service recipients of the micro-credentialing programs would receive a $500 stipend. Now, as long as that doesn't, that stipend is not in lieu of the bargaining unit contracts that have been negotiated at the local level. I will finish. There have been a lot of contentious debates about this issue and about education in general. There have been a lot of heated debates and heated testimony as well. I feel like it's time for a reset. We feel like Senate Bill 532 represents somewhat of a reset. As written, it looks to be a great starting point for real collaboration that includes a wide range of stakeholders, and it attempts to address some of the major issues that have been repeatedly debated without resolution. So with that, we stand in support and ask the committee to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last up for proponent oral testimony, we have Leah Fleider, Assistant Executive Director of Advocacy for KSB.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Time is short, so I won't echo too much of what other folks said. Of course, we join our allied associations in supporting this blueprint. Great to have this collaborative effort with the state legislature and the Board of Regents and the State Board of Education. Our support is based on our legislative resolutions that state we support the Kansas State Board of Education's Kansans Can vision and outcomes with the goal of leading the world in the success of each student. And so that's where our support for this blueprint springs. We have many of the same supportive comments that have already been made, so I will go ahead and just talk about revisions that we might suggest. We thank Regent Lane for her suggested amendments, and we would be able to support those. I haven't seen them in her testimony yet, but from my notes, those certainly look appropriate. We did have some concerns about KBOR designing and implementing a reading assessment system. We feel that should fall on the State Board of Education and local boards. We had some concerns about the cost. The requirements for training and support of in-service teachers are laudable, but as Regent Lane suggested, an appropriation needs to follow. And the cost of micro-credentialing 100% of in-service teachers is certainly a factor to consider, but also, the supplemental pay of the teachers to attend trainings outside of their contract hours and the cost of providing substitute teachers when their colleagues are attending the training. So those are all topics that we would like the legislature to consider. We would also ask for a locally elected board member to be included on the Literacy Advisory Committee. There's some good experience already provided for, but we would like to see a locally elected board member added to that. We would also suggest, regarding the Centers of Excellence in Reading, thank you, Cindy, that the state already has an existing network of service centers, and perhaps those could be utilized. Regent Lane spoke about not building any new buildings, and so perhaps rather than setting up an additional network, we could utilize those regional service centers that are already in existence. And so with that, I will stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and, Okay. Dr. Harwood, you are here today. Did you want to speak or only if there were questions for you? I have gone through all the testimony. I have neutral testimony for Matt Lindsay. I don't have it. It's State Board of Ed and Ma. It is not there.
Madam Chair, also,
Senator Sykes.
thank you. I did not see Leah Fleider's testimony.
No, it did not come through.
Okay.
And it will be loaded.
Thank you.
So we're going to look for that, but let's go ahead and, Matt, will you come up and have, I know that some people cut it off, we're not going to ask questions until, we're going to finish one section before we have the next, but I know that you have a recommendation for some change, so if you would provide your testimony. This is Matt Lindsay, President for the Kansas Independent College Association. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I come before you representing, of course, the independent colleges. Of the 21, 17 of them have teacher ed programs. In fact, nearly a fifth of the new teachers every year come from our schools in Kansas. We are supportive, highly supportive of the intent and objectives of Senate Bill 532. I can echo many of the things you heard from Dr. Lane and others on why we think this is valuable. Our presence as neutral and what keeps us from full-throated endorsement and support relates to some current concerns we have about the regulatory authority established in this bill. My testimony notes them in more specifics, but at the I would point out that this would establish, and I've checked with others, a new line by which the Board of Regents would have approval authority over degree programs and curriculum at independent colleges. That does not exist currently for any program at all. I don't think that is intentional, but multiple sections establish a road by which the Director of Literacy, who would report to the Board of Regents, would have the authority to determine and dictate certain aspects of curriculum at independent colleges. The places where we meet the state's goals and statewide efforts on teacher ed all come through the licensure and program approval at KSDE, which we are perfectly fine and continuing to do so and would be glad to continue and even add in those regards. But we find quite a bit of caution and concern about a precedent by which we start needing to submit our curriculum to the Board of Regents. I will wrap that up there, and I have suggested some changes in my testimony to fix that and would be happy to talk about it with those at the appropriate time.
So the committee assistant was able to find the testimony that was submitted on behalf of State Board of Education member Ma. If you would like to come up and speak for 2 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. Maybe I can squeeze in 2.5 because we have some things to talk about. But I do want to thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee for allowing us to speak today to this bill. The State Board believes that the Blueprint for Literacy is a good continuation of our Kansas Education Framework for Literacy, which is attached to my testimony. We approved the recommendations of the Dyslexia Task Force in 2019 and have begun implementation of every item there related to our responsibilities and duties. I outlined some of the efforts we championed in my testimony, including changes to ELA standards, to teacher preparation standards. We invested $15 million in letters training. We hired a program director, set up a literacy advisory council, and did a dyslexia handbook. Our concerns are in 2 areas. First, there are places where it is not clear whether the language refers to the State Board of Education or the State Board of Regents. For example, if line 14 on page 5 refers to the State Board of Education, we would object because we are capable of making our own reports to the legislature. If it refers to the State Board of Regents, we have no objection. We're also concerned about sections of the bill we identified which overstep our authority. We have already made recommendations to districts on screening tools, and we authorize all K-12 assessments. We already have in place formative, interim, and summative assessments. KBOR has no authority in either of these areas, so we would ask that section to be removed. Finally, on the goals, the bill has goals for K-12 assessment results that may be amended. We work every day to move students from level 1 to level 2 in all areas. And we know that there are at least a dozen factors that impact our success. We know that students in level 1 have more chronic absenteeism, higher poverty rates, more mobility, kind of a long list. What is proposed in 532 would be just one of many factors, and I'm not sure you can connect the dots in a straight line from what's in the bill to moving those results. It's just one of many factors. But we do want to focus on moving students from level 1 to level 2, because we do know that students in level 2 can read and can succeed, as evidenced by the correlation data that I sent you all earlier this week. So we're looking forward to this collaboration. We like this bill, and we'd like it even better with just a few minor adjustments. And I would stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So committee, what questions do we have? We'll start with Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Dr. Lane maybe could best answer my question. So there's lots of conversations and assessments and even some changes in there. And I'm reading, and again, I'm trying to piece together. So I kind of feel like I'm seeing maybe assessments for those who want to become teachers or are teachers, kind of to see where they are. And then with Dr. Yeager's testimony, he said, he was wanting to make sure that we had a baseline to where teachers were as we're kind of moving this direction. But there's also a piece in there for students, for teachers to kind of to see where they are. Can you kind of clarify some of that?
I think you're hitting on two things. There is the performance assessment in our pre-service programs that would allow a person who is aspiring to earn their degree in teaching to be assessed that they have not only the knowledge, but the actual skills to deliver on the science of reading, structured literacy. So that micro-credential performance assessment is talking about pre-service teachers doing that. We would like to open an opportunity for teachers who are in service as a pathway for them to also receive a micro-credential, an alternative to the full letters training and all of that kind of thing. And we've been in conversation with the state board about multiple pathways, and I believe, and Board Member Ma can affirm that. The other assessment piece is our assessments that are assessments of literacy. They are teacher classroom tools. So we concur that the Board of Regents should not be dictating assessments that are used in K-12. But the Regents does feel strongly that our teacher development programs should be required to teach teachers how to use diagnostic informative tools in their teacher prep programs. So that's our intention. And I offered one of the amendments to kind of clear that up because I thought the language was confusing in that area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Sure.
Other questions? Senator Petty?
Thank you. And this is for Cindy Lane. And Cindy, thanks for bringing it here. It came up, and I appreciate the amendments that you offer. I think it does address some of the issues that I saw as I look at this bill, which I think is a very good bill, and as was said by Tim Graham, positive when it comes to talking about K-12 education. But it did come up with a testimony from Matt Lindsay about the independent colleges, about one, the micro-certification. And so I'm wondering, does everything that's currently offered by the regions, is it also always offered by the independent colleges?
I don't know that because we don't oversee their programming. We don't approve their programming. So I appreciated Matt bringing up that we need to clarify that we're speaking to the public side of post-secondary education here. We welcome that partnership. We hope that they will engage, but we didn't mean to, in the bill, suggest that we would oversee anything that they do, but work in partnership. Now, the State Board of Education does accredit their programs, and so they may have a clearer analysis over the differences.
So like those micro-certifications could be offered by the...
Absolutely. We'd be glad to work in partnership to offer those, sure.
And then, losing my train of thought here. I don't know. I think that's it. I guess.
You know where I am.
Actually, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So a question that I have, that would be for Dr. Mercer, and as you come up, I'll go ahead and ask that question. You made reference to a common assessment that's being used across the system. So what's the common assessment in the system? What are you talking about? Are you talking about it's being used by all of the public universities? What is the assessment?
Exactly. It's being used by all the public universities. This group of 19 literacy experts that's been working over the course of the past year developed that assessment. So it builds on the content knowledge that students are learning in their methods class, but it's applied in a classroom with real students under observation with feedback. And so the assessment is the same, and the assignment is the same. So it's being piloted this spring.
Okay, and what specifically is it assessing?
And so it's taking components of structured literacy, developing a lesson, teaching that to a group of children, and assessing their knowledge based on that lesson. So it's a full cycle of a lesson.
So how would this assessment, other than it's practical and it's something that's being observed, so how would this assessment differ from the breadth of like a Pearson's assessment or a Praxis assessment for that credentialing?
Because it's happening in Kansas classrooms with Kansas children, right? So it's implementing that lesson. So not just describing it, not just saying, here are components that are important, I should do this and then I should do that, but actually standing and delivering in a classroom.
Okay. So of the elementary ed students that are there at the university that you represent, that are out there and they are student teaching, how many of them are student teaching with the home teacher that actually already has structured literacy, letters training, something like that?
So I don't have that data. I'd have to survey that. So we have criteria for cooperating teachers. Completion of letters is something that's just underway in the state. So that's not a requirement to be a student, to be a cooperating teacher at Kansas State.
The common assessment is for a particular course, is that right?
Correct. And that's pre-student teaching so that they have that skill that's being developed early on and then is refined when they're student teaching.
But it's for a lesson.
At this point.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this might be a question for legislative research. I know we don't currently do state assessments for like kindergarten through second grade, but is there a way we could get like Dibbles assessments and those things and compare different school districts and their scores on those versus their third grade assessments and fourth grade reading assessment scores and identify what school districts what programs they're currently using, because I think sometimes some teachers are really good at identifying this method doesn't work for this child because they're more of a visual learner than an auditory learner. And what works for, I know with my own 3 kids, what works for one doesn't necessarily work for all 3 of them. So I want to make sure that this literacy program is malleable enough that we can make it work for everyone.
So do I have someone that's out there that wants to respond to that? Dr. Lane, would you like to respond, or Dr. Mercer?
So I might invite Ann Ma to also respond because she can answer the piece of what kinds of assessments are currently happening in the K-2 space. And you're absolutely right. We need to understand that. But the tools that I referred to, the diagnostic, informative, are for the teacher and the family to plan instruction for that child. It would be a misuse of that information to pull it up to a level for accountability. So those are teacher tools. It's like your doctor's stethoscope and blood pressure cuff and the things that they use in their assessment. Those are what those tools are for teachers, for families, for students to plan the learning. So I'll have to defer what are we doing currently to assess K2.
Madam Chair, Senator, Every district is required to assess dyslexia, or actually to screen for dyslexia 3 times a year. There are different tests to do that, but they have to be approved by the State Board of Education. So those are different, and it's a screening tool, and then depending on the screening tool, then they would move on to a more of a diagnostic tool, and DIBELS would be an example of something like that. DIBELS scores tend to be pretty involved, and so it's not an online test, so the data is harder to aggregate up, and I would agree probably is not a great comparison because it's only used in certain circumstances. And with that, Madam Chair, I don't need to be here for answering other questions about the information I provided, but given the time, I will be happy to come back when you work the bill to try to answer any questions I can about assessment as you're working that part of it.
Okay, and committee, is there any additional information that we are wanting that we haven't asked for yet that you can think of? Senator Straub?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we see district by district what their reading grade 4 scores are? I'm just saying grade 4 because that's what's in the bill.
And readings, grade 4 is in the bill. I'm going to ask that we see scores 3, 4, 5 through 8. And the reason I'm asking for that is that was an amendment request. Also, I was recently enlightened, so this would have been yesterday, that we see a score that's in 3rd grade, it peaks at 4th, and it drops right back down at 5th grade and continues to be on a decline. And that was true for 2023, and it was true for 2019. It mirrors, though the 2019 scores were a bit higher than the 2023. But I don't want us to, now that we know that there is an outlier on the grade 4 assessment that seems to be consistent from year to year, where students start here at 3rd, pop way up, drop right back down, and then continue to decline. That, to me, is a demonstration that that assessment is not accurately or consistently evaluating the way the others are. There's no explanation for why statewide there would be that bump.
If there may be, if you were looking at 2023 grade 4, there could be a COVID factor in there. So is there a way we can look at those prior to 2019?
This is where it spiked up, and that's why I'm telling you the interesting thing is it mirrors with 2019, but I want us to look at the broader. Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You were asking if we'd like additional information. I would like to see a breakdown on the cost. $18 million is a lot of money, and we're talking about this for every year, or is that just for 23 and 24?
I think that it's gone down. That's, I think, what originally came from Adam Profit, but the request has gone down significantly because, let's be real, these centers of excellence, you're not going to have 6 of them start up the first year. So it's gone down, but we'll have a breakout for that. Agreed. Any other questions? Committee, thank you so much for your work. We're adjourned.